Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today we have with us Murli Ranganathan, who describes himself as an unaffiliated researcher. We'll talk about that in a bit. So Murli, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on winning the NIF Translation Fellowship.
Thank you so much, Rishwant. It's great to have won it. And I'm looking forward to the next 6 months of translation and annotation. And hopefully, we'll have a manuscript ready for publication at the end of 6 months. Thank you so much.
The text you have selected outright is a very challenging text. But we will talk about it. And the text you are translating right now is Tibet Mein Savavash, translated as In Search of the Buddha, Travels in India, Nepal, and Tibet, 1929 to 1930, written by Rahul Sankrityayan. And my first question, tell us about Rahul Sankrityayan.
Rahul is a major, uh, you know, presence in Indian public life from the 20s onwards, 20s to the 60s. I mean, but in spite of that, he seems to be relatively unknown to the modern generation. I mean, I keep telling people, have you heard of Rahul Sankrityayan? And people who are very well read, people who are from the Hindi sphere, people who are from, people who are looking at the Buddha and Buddhist religion, nobody has really heard of him. It's a very small minority who has heard of Rahul Sankrityayan. Rahul Sankrityayan, born in 1893, left home as a teenager and began roaming. I mean, he was a true what he would call himself as a gumakkar. I mean, he was literally roaming the length and breadth of India until the 1920s, by which time he got ensnared into various projects and he was attracted to all kinds of things, very curious, joined the Arya Samaj, joined other religious organizations, became a mendicant of some sort, learned Urdu, was in the Musafir Pathshala and was in Lahore for many years, did all kinds of things. Then he went to Ladakh, and that's when our real story starts, when he starts looking at Buddhism as a religion. Because by which time he was already a little disenchanted with the Hindu gods, as he himself says, and he was looking for something which was a bit more of a more steadfast anchor. And he felt that Buddhism was something which would sort of help him get along in life, and it did. From Ladakh, he was in Sri Lanka. Then he went to Nepal, and this is where our story starts. The story in the book Tibet Mein Sawa Baras. It starts when he leaves Colombo in December 1928 and sort of makes his way across all the Buddhist ruins. I mean, he sort of imagines. I mean, the first chapter is sort of, it literally transports you into the time of the Buddha, where he's imagining Buddha sort of spending his monsoons in Jetavana, going to whatever Gridrakutas here near near Varanasi, and all kinds of things. It's written in a very surreal way. The first chapter, because that's the first time he's seeing these ruins in a as lived experience, as a religion sort of coming into shape there. And from there he goes to Nepal, where the religion is actually a living religion. So it's a fantastic sort of transition for him to get into Nepal, meet practicing Buddhists, and from there he starts walking from Kathmandu. And after about a 4 month trek, he sort of more goes on to reach Lhasa. And the entire journey, which was actually undertaken incognito, is a really sort of a captivating read, so to speak.
One more question I want to ask is like Rahul Sankrityayan is almost considered the father of the Hindi travel literature. And like many of his works were already translated, like from Volga to Ganga. But why is this work, which is almost 9 decades old, was not brought into English language?
Actually, he's considered the father of Hindi travel literature, sometimes Indian travel literature. I think, of course, wrongly, I would say, because even Bhartendu Harishchandra has written little travel snippets. And if you look at the printing list of the Khadgavilas press in Patna from the 1880s, they have been printing travelogues. So it's not as if there were no travel accounts in Hindi before Rahul started writing. And this was his first travel account from the travel in 1930, and the book actually came out in April 1934. And but still, the quantum of writing which he did in the travel genre was so stupendous that clearly he sort of literally became a sort of a milestone in Hindi travel literature. And that was just one of the genres in which he wrote. I mean, his autobiography is a classic, 6 volumes, and he wrote plays. He wrote uh, numerous texts looking at Buddhist material. He wrote all kinds of introductions, Tibetan grammar, and novels, short stories. The Volga to Ganga is actually a collection of short stories. So, but unfortunately, there has been real lack of critical attention to his works. People actually reading them and seeing what kind of significance they have got. Some of them have been translated, like Volga to Ganga, as you mentioned, from the Volga to the Ganga, which is now sort of considered an historical account, but as Rahul clearly says, it's just fiction. So the very little translation of Rahul's works have been done actually, and this book also falls into that same category. Of the literally 100 odd books which Rahul Sankrityayan has written and published, hardly anything has been translated. The Volga to Ganga was translated. One of his books on the Buddhist religion has been translated into English. Some books were translated into Bengali in the 1960s. But beyond that, Rahul has literally sort of, slipped into an abyss where so many top level writers of Indian languages are sort of enter. I mean, which you just cannot recover them until somebody really is willing to spend a lot of time and effort in sort of excavating them. And I read many other books by Rahul Sankrityayan, of course, and I found that this was his first real book, as in the first book in which he actually talks about his own autobiographical, I mean, journey into in towards Buddhism, as well as the actual travel account. And I felt it was a fairly significant milestone in his own literary journey as well as in his life journey. And that's what really attracted me to this book. And I thought this is certainly worth spending time for a start, and if possible, maybe do more work as we go on.
So, what is the importance of this text, especially for the English language non-fiction readers now?
I mean, this I mean, you could call this book is it's almost a century old now. I mean, the journey started in 1928, and hopefully the book will be published before 2028. So it'll be almost 100 years by the time English readers will get to read of this book. And what will they make of it? I mean, when they start reading it, they'll realize that there are lots of issues which Rahul observes, which he comments upon, which are still relevant to to the modern public discourse. I mean, you have the journey starts in Colombo, it ends in Colombo, and then it goes across India. Then you're in Nepal for a few months, and then in Tibet for a year or so. So all these areas, regions, countries, if you will, are still sort of in various kinds of interaction with each other. I mean, the interactions between India and Nepal. He talks about the Indian colonial government, but also assumes that India will have an independent government very soon, and what will their reactions to Nepal be? Nepal and Tibet, and then Tibet and China, because for a brief period, the period when he went is when China was not present in Tibet in any meaningful manner. And but everybody knew that they would be back very soon, and they were back. The first Chinese embassy came back to Tibet in 1934, just when Rahul was there for a second time. So this entire book really speculates on what these relationships are, what are they actually made of, what are these governments actually doing. For example, he's got very strong things to say about the Nepali government, which was the Rana Sarkar, which was called the Teen Sarkar, and he speculates that if they continue this way, not only will they impoverish the nation, but they will also collapse. And a lot of that actually happened over the next few decades. Similarly, he talks about the rather, uh, strange relationship between India and Nepal. India is such a huge country, and then Nepal also a Hindu country, and what kind of influences India will continue to exert on Nepal, and similarly between Nepal and Tibet and China. So all of these things which he talks about 100 years ago are still very relevant to most. I mean, most readers who actually are interested in South Asia, in modern in modern discourse, so to speak. And I think that's just one of the aspects. That is the contemporary aspect. But the real aspect is also the historical aspect, which is the fact that the travel from Kathmandu to Lhasa, which was actually done on foot, and then maybe the return was done on the back of a donkey or a mule, was something which was going to go away very soon. I mean, literally in the next couple of decades, all those things vanished. So, I mean, you're talking about a world which was at the cusp of change. Both Nepal was at the, and Tibet, both of them are at the cusp of change. And this sort of really looks at what it meant, what slow travel really meant. I mean, we talk about slow travel now, but that was genuinely slow travel. I mean, every day you covered 10 to 15 miles and you reached a specific stage, and beyond that you couldn't go, because then you would be in the middle of nowhere if you didn't reach the next stage within the next few hours. So you had everything was, it was governed by stages and by transport. And if you actually walked, and Rahul actually walked almost all the way from Kathmandu, in fact, from Raxaul on the border, the Bihar Nepal border, from Raxaul to Lhasa. And that was a really slow and sometimes dangerous journey. And that is something which people who think of adventure and all of that. I mean, the kind of adventures he had in what was not supposed to be an adventure journey was just amazing. I think even that will be a major focal or focus of attraction to a modern reader.
This might actually influence some travelers to take the same route that he has taken, if possible, given the current geopolitics now. One more observation is that was fascinating was that.
Actually, it is possible.
Sorry, Molly, please continue.
Actually, it's possible to do it. Actually, it's possible to do it even now, and geopolitics notwithstanding. But the roads have become so modern. So the journey which he takes 4 months could take you only 4 days. I mean, unless you even if you walk, everything is now pretty much well organized. There are milestones. There are all kinds of things. There are. I mean, you could get food and shelter wherever you went, and so on. So it's, of course, the territory between Nepal and Tibet is still pretty wild, so to speak. But with modern roads and vehicles, I mean, almost everything has been named. So I mean, for people who want to sort of replicate this journey, they have to reach Everest base camp and then walk solo. I think that would sort of get you into get you a similar experience. Nothing else other than that.
No, that is fascinating. One more fascinating detail about this book was, which I already mentioned, is that he was actually traveling incognito, right? Without his real identity being revealed. So why was he doing that in the first place? That's the first thing. And second thing is, how is this concealment of his is going to affect the book's narrative, the book's reliability, and the voice of the book? So, or how does this work?
So 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 Rahul was already on the radar of the British secret police, because he had participated in the 1920-21 non-cooperation movement, spent about a couple of years in jail, and so wherever he went, they were keeping an eye on him after that. I mean, when he went to Ladakh in 26 and in Colombo. So basically, if you wanted to leave the country, you needed a passport, a passport which would actually say that you can actually travel to so and so country. Passport limited to countries. I mean, what was actually a reverse visa of a modern time. So your government will tell you that you can use this document to travel to country X and Y, but not country Z or any other country for that matter. So getting a passport was very difficult for Rahul. That was one. The second one was, according to the 1855 India-Nepal treaty, no Indians could enter Nepal and no Nepali nationals could enter India. I mean, that was reversed later on. So at that time, only during Shivratri, which was in February, Mahashivratri, could Indian pilgrims actually enter Nepal and go to Pashupatinath temple in Kathmandu. And otherwise, they couldn't enter Nepal. And getting a passport to enter from the British side also was difficult. Similarly, from Nepal to Tibet was also, Tibet actually did not allow any entry of foreigners, for example. So very, very, restrained entry. By 1930, they had, even the British who had first entered Tibet in 1904 under Francis Young husband, they had also withdrawn from most of those areas, and though they still control the roads, but it was back to the Tibetan government, and the Tibetan government was not interested in letting anybody come to Tibet, except for the Newar traders of Nepal, who had a long relationship from for many centuries before that. So they would be the ones trading between Lhasa and Calcutta via Kathmandu and many other places. So the Newar traders could go without any passport or any restrictions, but almost nobody else. So there were all these kind of restrictions, but the main one was for Rahul to get a passport from the British authorities. So to bypass that, he masqueraded as a pilgrim in the Mahashivratri of February 1929 and entered Kathmandu. And after 2 or 3 weeks in Kathmandu as a Hindu saint of sorts, he sort of entered a Buddhist monastery and changed his appearance, changed his name, and started learning Tibetan for a couple of months in Kathmandu itself before he could actually start the journey. And so he tried to pass himself off as a Kinnauri lama, a lama from Kinnaur in what is now Himachal Pradesh, which also was part of the Tibetan sphere. Ladakh, Kinnaur, they were all affiliated to the Tibetan Buddhism sphere. And tried to pass off as a Kinnauri lama, which was the closest an Indian could get to that sphere. And he actually found a couple of other monks from Kinnaur, and he sort of fell in with them, and he then found it no, a major lama who would then sort of act as his patron and sort of take him across the border from Nepal to Tibet. So he affiliated sort of himself with that lama. So yeah, so that's the reason why he had to go incognito. And but the important question is, how did it affect the narrative? So when he actually wrote this narrative, he had to leave out the names of all those people who helped him in Nepal, in Tibet, the people who guided him, the people who sheltered him, and so on. So all of those names had to be removed, and he would sort of refer to them in the third person, and sometimes he didn't even refer to those incidents. So all of that has not featured in this travelogue. But luckily for us, he again wrote his autobiography about 10 to 15 years after this travelogue was published. And there he revisits this episode of traveling to Lhasa. And he mentions all kinds of names there. I mean, this was the person I went. I mean, he says that in the book he would say Nepali businessmen, but in his autobiography it clearly mentions who it is, why he went there, and what kind of help he got from them. Similarly, some of his other helpers, people who escorted him up to the border, they have written books in Nepali, and those are available, and those sort of literally dovetail exactly with the descriptions which Rahul provides. And this time with names of villages where he actually sheltered and so on. So we have multiple sources now to corroborate what he's saying, and I'm pretty confident that there is really almost no exaggeration in many of almost everything he says. And I think he's been pretty honest. And he sort of even describes some of his own, mistakes and the episodes when he gets angry with people and so on. So I'm very confident that he's being very truthful. And when I start annotating this book, I will be using those other resources to sort of cross-reference and name people in the footnotes so that people can then realize that yeah, this is the Nepali businessman who has branches in Ladakh, branches in Lhasa, branches in Shigatse, who's helping him all across the route. And but once he goes to Tibet, sort of declares his presence to the Dalai Lama. That is the previous Dalai Lama, not the current one. The previous Dalai Lama, who I think who passed away in 1933. He then sort of then he starts mentioning names and so on. So after he reaches Lhasa, and a few weeks after that, you begin to get names, and that's when the narrative is a little bit more open in terms of who's helping him and who's not.
That's fascinating. Molly, you have mentioned elsewhere that this book, Rahul also makes some commentary on the side effects of technology and something about what we currently call climate change. Can you throw some reflections on that?
Yeah. I mean, these are all words which have come into your usage in the last couple of decades. But I mean, he's seeing the deforestation which is happening rapidly in Nepal and some parts of Tibet too. And he can see that if I mean if this goes on for a longer time, this is certainly going to affect the nature. So he is lamenting the loss of forest cover quite often wherever he sees them, and then he's traveling. I mean, if you read his autobiography, he can see the changes from late 1929 to I mean, for the next 10 years. So I mean, that sort of gives him a range to see what has happened even in those 10 years of travel, and how Nepali forests are being denuded quite rapidly. And in terms of technology, he's sort of sometimes he's a dreamer. Oh my God, if the trains come, we won't be able to see the nature, so and we can't do this kind of slow travel. I mean, sometimes laments that in that manner, and sometimes he's all for technology. I mean, not only in his autobiography but also in this book, he claims to have introduced you know the kind of charcoal to Nepal by actually pointing out that some of the black coal deposits which were being used as manure can actually be burned for fuel. And he claims that nobody in Nepal knew that, and he's the person who actually pointed that out. So I mean, so he's little ambivalent in terms of in terms of both use of technology sometimes, and sometimes about the kind of modernity coming in, and you can't resist it at all. So there is a little ambivalence, but overall he's certainly lamenting the loss of forest cover and so on.
One of the main things that he's doing during his journeys is trying to collect the Sanskrit texts, right, written by Indian Buddhist philosophers before 10th century, and now they are lost in India. Now, this search took him to Tibet almost three times in 1930s. Now, my question is, how did these efforts that were made by Rahul has helped in the expanding the field of Buddhist literature, Buddhist scholarship in India?
I mean, the discoveries he made during his later journeys, not in this book, but the later journeys of 1936 and 38, were certainly a milestone discoveries in terms of actually discovering the original Sanskrit texts which had been lost and but which were being preserved in Tibetan and or Chinese translations. So what he did is many of those texts he himself prepared a critical edition of those texts in Sanskrit and had them published. So that really was a important contribution to the study of Buddhist Sanskrit literature. That has of course provided a lot of raw material to many Buddhist scholars, not just in India but all over the world. I mean, Buddhism is a religion studied across all kinds of places across the world, and these texts have proved to be critical texts in terms of being a completely new resource for Buddhist scholars. And besides that, he wrote a lot of articles based on his own research, and even those are actually fairly important. Some of them are actually translated into French, published in the journal Asiatic in the 30s itself. So they were considered fairly important enough for them to be translated from Hindi to French and be published. So, and he also wrote Tibetan grammars, Tibetan dictionaries, and manuals to teach Tibetan. For example, those manuals were printed in Calcutta for use in Ladakh. So primers for teaching Tibetan to Ladakhi children. So he did all kinds of things connected to Tibetan language also. And of course, they have all been, of course, overshadowed by more modern work. But he was one of the first persons to write a Tibetan primer aimed at children who didn't know Tibetan at all. So that's another thing he did when he was in Ladakh in the 1930s after this journey.
And Rahul Sankrityayan is also a translator himself, right? Can you throw some reflections on that?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yeah, so Rahul is himself a translator. In fact, many of his early books were translations from Sanskrit into Hindi. A lot of those Buddhist texts, Abhidharma Kosha, Majjhima Niyaka, and all of that, he translated into Hindi and had them published very soon after. The Mahabodhi Society, the Banaras Hindu University, Kashi Vidyapit, all kinds of publishers he went to and got them published. So he himself was a translator, and a lot of his the Volga to Ganga and all of those books are actually, of course, based on his readings of English texts and then using his imagination. So of course they are not translations, but clearly he was using English resources, and then a lot of those materials was just not available in Hindi then or even now for that matter, and he was sort of interpreting them for a Hindi audience.
Molly, can you tell us how did you develop interest in translations in general, and why do you think the translation as such matter?
I mean, if there had been no translators, I think I would have not been able to read 90% of the books I grew up with also. I mean, starting from, Tintin and Asterix, something as mundane as that, and to the Ramayana or the Mahabharata, or then going on to, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Loza, and God knows how many other French, Italian, German, Spanish, Japanese writers. I mean, if there had been no translation, I mean, life would have been so much more poorer. And for at least the first 15, 20 years, I didn't realize that. I mean, I was reading Tintin and Asterix in translation, for example. I mean, those are some of the greatest translations I've read. I mean, for those kind of things to be translated so seamlessly into a different language and still retain the entire level of punch and surprise is just amazing. So I mean, so life has been translation in the making, so to speak. And so I mean, so there is really nothing to say about the importance of translation when you realize that almost everything I mean, literally everything in any Indian language. I mean, which I Bengali for that matter. I mean, almost all. I mean, I've read so much Bengali text, and all of that is in translation. I mean, so I mean, I owe a great debt. Not just I mean, all of us actually owe a great debt to translators who have been. No, some of them are just superlative, to so superlative that they just don't appear in the text at all. So I mean, so we have. I mean, all of us have grown up with translations. Most of us don't realize it, perhaps, and most of us certainly don't realize the importance of the work which translators have been doing since time immemorial. I mean, it's not translation is hardly a new thing. I mean, it has been happening for, I would say, I mean, 5,000 years. I mean, long before even the written text came to India, maybe. So there is really nothing more to say about the importance of translations as such. But the work of modern translators is in a different mold because the volumes have gone up. There are a number of languages into which you can translate into and translate from is now become a lot more what do you say, easier to contemplate than it was, say, 100 years ago. But still, I think we are still only scratched the surface, so to speak, especially in India, in terms of trying to. Even now, I mean, translating from Hindi to Malayalam, for example. I mean, you would be hard pressed to identify 10 books, and the vice versa, even less. So, and that's just one language combination. I mean, so it's I'm talking about direct translations, not Hindi to English and then English to Malayalam. So I think there's a lot of important work which translators need to do, and all of us are translating even as we speak sometimes. I mean, in Bombay, you're translating from multiple languages, using multiple languages, for example, and all across India too. So we translate in everyday life, and so translation is a I would say a fact of life, and the sooner we realize that, the better.
Molly, what do you think will be the key challenges while translating this text? One we have already discussed, which is most of it is done in incognito, and you have trying to trace the names of the people he's talking about. And some of the places which Rahul has mentioned in the text may not be found in the modern maps. Uh, so, what do you think are some of the challenges, and how are you planning to address them?
Right. One is both these challenges. I think these are fairly, I think, easily addressed to some extent. I mean, now I know the names, practically all of them, having read his autobiography and his other books. I can sort of at least name most names. Even place names, I have discovered the maps. He has used the survey maps of the UK government from the 1920s, which is what he saw. So then place names can, at least I know that he has used the transliteration of those English names. And it's still a little difficult to, pin them down in Google Maps sometimes, but I think that can still be done with a little bit of effort. But then the biggest challenge is to to render the Buddhist terminology. I mean, he himself is discovering them himself, and to render that and to make sense of that in a meaningful manner, and to sort of strike the right balance between translating every Tibetan word into English, or I mean, he himself of course uses Tibetan words. So it's a question of retaining some of those words to make sure that the original flavor is still there, but also being clear that your modern reader will be able to understand what is being said. So, I mean, like a song is a fort, and you can maybe explain it once or twice, but then you can then start using zong wherever he encounters a fort, for example. So that's just one example. So that is one thing, and then the history of Buddhism in Tibet and the history of Tibet itself. He sort of gets into that. But at the end of the book, he says, I have made a lot of mistakes. Here are a few corrections, but don't take any of the stuff which I've said here as sacrosanct. So I've been trying to, some of the years, if it's only years, I've been trying to correct them myself. But some of the longer narratives where he's got it wrong, I might point that out in a footnote or an endnote, and but there is still going to be instances where even I might miss out what he has what is a mistake which he might have realized later on. So I will try and make sure that I flag most of them, but there are chances that some of them will slip in still.
Molly Ranganathan, thank you so much for this interview, and it's a lovely conversation. And looking forward to read the book soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to you, Rishwant, and thank you to everybody in the New India Foundation. And look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much.